Madam President, as I think most Americans know, about 4 years ago, the Supreme Court rendered a decision which I happen to believe is one of the worst in the history of the Supreme Court, and that is their decision regarding Citizens United. And as a result of that decision, what they said is that corporations are people, and that individuals could spend an unlimited sum of money in elections. And by unlimited, I mean hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, quite as much as they want through independent expenditures. And I think many Americans observed the repercussions of that decision. Just last month, a gentleman named Sheldon Adelson, one of the wealthiest people in this country, worth many billions, held what was called the Adelson primary in Nevada. And what he did is invited prospective Republican candidates for president to come to Nevada to chat with him, to tell him their views. And if he decides to support one of those candidates, they will end up receiving, in all likelihood, hundreds of millions of dollars. But it is not just Sheldon Adelson. Probably even more significantly, when we talk about the impact of Citizens United and we talk about the flood of money coming in from the billionaire class into the political process, it's important to talk about the Koch brothers. Now, I understand there has been a lot of criticism of Majority Leader Reid because he has talked about the Koch brothers. But I think the Majority Leader is exactly right. And the issue here is not personal. I don't know if the Koch brothers are nice guys or not nice guys. That's not the issue. The issue is the impact that this billionaire family, the second wealthiest family in America, is having on the political process. And second of all, and even more importantly, what do they stand for? Who are they? Why are they pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process? Now, I have a problem, to tell you the truth. Whether somebody is a right-winger or a left-winger, I have a real problem with these rich guys spending huge sums of money. But at the end of the day, what is important to understand is, what do they want? Why are they spending so much money in politics? Why are they supporting candidates throughout this country, running for the Senate, running for the House? Clearly, they'll be heavily involved in the next presidential election. What do they stand for? That's the issue. And it disturbs me very much, by the way, that the media hasn't been talking about that. What do these guys stand for? What do they want? Now, many Americans know that the Koch brothers provided the main source of funding for the creation of the Tea Party. That's fine. And many Americans know that the Koch brothers want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They've run a lot of ads supporting candidates who want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and that's their view, and that's fine as well. But what I think most Americans don't know is that the Koch brothers want to repeal virtually every major piece of legislation that has been passed in the last 80 years to help the middle class, to help working families, to help the elderly, to help the children, to help low-income people. Their view, their ideological view, is that we should eliminate or substantially cut back on all of those programs. Now, in 1980, Madam President, David Koch, one of the Koch brothers, was the vice presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party. And in fact, he helped fund the Libertarian Party in that year. And I want to read to you and discuss with you just a few of the excerpts from the 1980 Libertarian Party platform that David Koch ran on. And people may say, well, you know, that was back in 1980, but you know what? It is my impression that their views haven't changed one iota, that they are funding many, many organizations all over this country who essentially espouse those very same views that David Koch ran on in 1980. And now here's the first quote that was in the 1980 Libertarian Party platform that David Koch ran on as vice presidential candidate and helped fund. He said, "We favor the repeal," this is right up here, "we favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. That's their view. And that shouldn't surprise anybody. These guys do not believe that government should be involved in health care and retirement security. It is totally consistent with what they believe. But when Americans see ads on television paid for by David Koch, I hope they understand that these guys eventually want to see, probably not tomorrow, the repeal of Social Security. And they want to privatize it. They don't want it to exist. Now, what is the reality? The reality is that the overwhelming majority of the American people disagree with the Koch brothers. The reality is that Social Security is probably the most successful federal program in the history of our country. For more than 78 years, in good times and bad, Social Security has provided every single benefit owed to every eligible American without delay. That's in good times, bad times, recession, boom, whatever it was. Before Social Security was created, nearly half of seniors lived in poverty. Today, while still too high, that number is 9.1%. We've gone from over 50% down to 9.1%, largely because of Social Security. And here is the main point. According to virtually every poll that I have seen, including the latest National Journal poll on the subject, 76% of the American people do not want to cut Social Security at all, something, an issue that you and I were involved in, do not want to cut Social Security. They sure as heck do not want to repeal Social Security. So when you see the ads on television being paid for by the Koch brothers, understand where they are coming from in terms of Social Security. Now, let me give you another quote, and this is an exact quote from the 1980 platform of the Libertarian Party, David Koch, vice presidential candidate. Quote, "We favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid." Abolition. What does that mean? It means that if you are a senior citizen, 70 years of age, you're not feeling well, you go to the doctor diagnoses you with cancer, you're not going to have Medicare there for you. And if you don't have a lot of money, how are you going to get the health care that you need? Well, you know what? You may not. Because according to the Koch brothers, the federal government should not be involved in public health insurance programs like Medicare and Medicaid. And what happens if you're a low-income person? What happens if your kid is on the Children's Health Insurance Program? It's called Dr. Dinosaur in Vermont. I don't know what it's called in Hawaii, but it covers all the states of this country. Millions of kids getting their health insurance through the Children's Health Insurance Program. What's the Koch brothers' view? We should eliminate it. Federal government should not be involved in health insurance. Now, according to the latest polls that I have seen on this subject, 81% of the American people do not want to cut Medicare benefits at all, and 60% of the American people don't want to cut Medicaid benefits at all because they understand that in these tough times, it is terribly important that we have guaranteed health care programs for our people. And yet, the view of the Koch brothers is that we should end Medicare and Medicaid. So again, when you see ads on television, understand who is paying for that. Now, Madam President, as you know, we have been discussing the minimum wage bill. And you and I agree that it is absolutely imperative that we raise the minimum wage. I think $10.10, the bill that we had on the floor last week, is a start. I would go further. But I think most Americans understand that a family, breadwinner in a family who's making all of $7.25 an hour or $14,000, $15,000 a year, that is no wage upon which anyone can live. And yet, when you read the platform that David Koch ran on, and again, their success is that where their ideas were thought to be pretty crazy and kooky back in 1980, he got 1% of the vote. and ran because they thought Ronald Reagan was much too liberal, 1980. Today, these ideas are increasingly becoming mainstream. They're in the Ryan budget, passed by the Republican House. They are reflected by many actions right here by my Republican Senate colleagues. And one example is that when we talk about the minimum wage, some of us think we got to raise it. Their view, what the Koch brothers said in 1980, and I believe it is their view today, quote, "We support repeal of all laws which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws." So this is not a debate about whether you raise the minimum wage to $10.10, you do what they're doing in Seattle, Washington, over a period of time, raising it to $15 an hour, whether you raise it to $9 an hour. That's not their debate. Their debate is we should repeal the concept of the minimum wage. And what does that mean in real terms? It means that in high unemployment areas in this country, where workers are desperate for jobs, if an employer says, "I'm going to give you $3 an hour," and you say, "I can't live on $3," the employer says, "Well, I got 20 other people who are prepared to take that job." That's their goal. That's their goal. They do not believe the federal government should be involved in providing at least a minimum wage for the workers of this country. They believe, among other things, that we should abolish the United States Postal Service. And I don't want to get into that very much, but their view is, again, Postal Service, a federal government program, not a question we're having a debate. How do you strengthen the Postal Service? What do you do? What do you not do? They want to abolish the United States Postal Service. Let me go to another quote from David Koch, which I think is maybe the most interesting of them all. This is where they're coming from. This is their philosophy. Quote, "We oppose all government welfare, relief projects, and aid to the poor programs. All these government programs are privacy invading, paternalistic, demeaning, and inefficient. The proper source of help for such persons is the voluntary efforts of private groups and individuals," end of quote. All right, I want to put into English what they say. What they are saying is they want to get rid of food stamps. They want to get rid of all nutrition programs, all affordable housing programs, Meals on Wheels programs, which help vulnerable seniors, congregate meal programs, Head Start, which obviously is important to millions of working families and their children. So you ask, well, what happens if I am hungry? And there is no food stamp program, because they want to get rid of all of these programs, because they think the federal government should not be involved in these issues. What do we do when people are hungry, when they can't find jobs? Well, they can go to their local church, they can go to their local charity, and maybe they'll get some help, maybe they won't. In other words, we are back to the days of Charles Dickens. We are back to the days of Charles Dickens, where ordinary people and lower income people have no rights and no benefits. And the only way they get help is if some charity is there to dole out some money to them. I don't believe that that is where the American people are, and I don't believe that is what the American people want. Back in 1980, the Libertarian Party had a rather bold proposal, and they said, and I quote, "We support the eventual repeal of all taxation." Essentially what they're saying is no more government. That's it. No more government. Now, Madam President, there's going to be a vote in a few minutes, so I'm going to see. So I will be back on this issue. But I just wanted to point out to what degree these folks, who are worth at least $80 billion, whose wealth increased last year by $12 billion, who have indicated that they are prepared to spend as much as it takes to elect people who, to some degree or another, I'm sure that not all of the candidates they support agree with everything they say, but they know what they're doing. They're smart. So they are spending huge sums of money to create an America in which the wealthiest people will get huge tax breaks while working families, the middle class, the elderly, the children, and the sick will be left out on the street all by themselves. That is not the vision of America that the American people believe in. I doubt that there are 5 or 10% of the American people who believe in that vision. It may be less than that. But when you have $80 billion and you're worth that much, and when you can spend unlimited sums of money, you will have a huge impact on the political process. And you will have candidates who talk about this perspective, who defend this point of view, because that's where their money for campaigns comes from, rather than talking about the needs of working families or ordinary Americans. So, Madam President, I hope very much, and let me actually, maybe the last point that I want to make on this is that 34 years ago, Koch Brothers said, "We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission," end of quote. They have come so far in 34 years that that is now the position of a number of Republicans, including, as I understand it, the chairman of the National Republican Party. And what does that mean? It means that if you repeal all campaign finance laws, the Koch brothers and other billionaires will not just be able to spend as much as they want on independent campaign expenditures, they will be able to give money directly to the candidates of
all time for debate has expired.
So let me conclude by saying I hope everybody pays attention to what the Koch brothers stand for. And with that, I would yield the floor.